Right. Imagine being caught red-handed lying to the British public about the state of public finances, being accused of manipulating markets, being formally reported for investigation, and then watching as the very ethics advisor appointed to investigate you simply clears you of wrongdoing without even conducting a proper investigation. That is exactly what has just happened to Rachel Reeves. Nigel Farage demanded an investigation into whether the Chancellor lied about the fiscal black hole to justify her massive tax increases. The independent ethics advisor has dismissed the calls entirely. No investigation, no consequences, just a total whitewash, and the British public is absolutely furious. Stay with British royal family because this corruption at the highest levels of government is absolutely staggering. Quick favour, if you are already outraged by this establishment cover-up, smash that subscribe button right now. Over 92% of you have not yet. It is completely free, takes 1 second, and genuinely means everything to us. Cheers if you did. Right, let us talk about why this decision is absolutely devastating for British democracy. Sir Keir Starmer's independent ethics advisor has dismissed calls for an investigation into whether Rachel Reeves lied about the state of the public finances ahead of the budget. Independent. That is the key word there. Supposedly independent. Except Sir Laurie Magnus was appointed by Keir Starmer himself. So how independent can he really be when his job depends on keeping the Prime Minister happy? When his position exists at the pleasure of the very government he is supposed to be investigating? The Chancellor remains in hot water over claims she misled voters about the need to hike taxes for a second year running, and claims she manipulated the market in doing so. This is not just about lying to the public, although that would be bad enough. This is about potentially manipulating financial markets. This is about deliberately creating a false narrative about the state of public finances in order to justify tax increases that were not necessary. That is market manipulation. That is potentially criminal behaviour. Rachel Reeves repeatedly cited the Office for Budget Responsibility's reduction in projected productivity growth over the coming years, which cost her £16 billion. She talked about this constantly. She used it to justify her enormous tax increases. She used it to create a sense of fiscal crisis. But here is what she failed to mention. That £16 billion reduction was offset with higher tax receipts, leaving no black hole at all, no deficit, no crisis, no justification for the massive tax increases she imposed. She lied by omission. She told the British public half the story. She highlighted the bad news whilst hiding the good news. She created a false impression of fiscal catastrophe in order to justify policies she wanted to implement anyway. That is lying. That is manipulation. That is exactly the kind of behaviour the ministerial code is supposed to prevent. Following the budget, Nigel Farage wrote to the Prime Minister's independent ethics advisor Sir Laurie Magnus, demanding an investigation into whether the Chancellor had lied. The ministerial code demands ministers be as open as possible with Parliament and the public. Rachel Reeves was not open. She was deliberately misleading. She selectively presented information to create a false impression. That is a clear violation of the ministerial code. Farage said the Chancellor had been pushing a sustained public and media campaign, portraying the public finances as being in a state of collapse in order to prepare political ground for approximately £30 billion of tax increases. That is exactly what she did. Week after week, she appeared on television and radio warning about the terrible state of public finances. Week after week, she talked about the black hole she had inherited. Week after week, she prepared the British public for devastating tax increases, all based on information she knew to be incomplete and misleading. Farage continued, where serious allegations are raised by a Member of Parliament and supported by contemporaneous reporting, the public is entitled to expect that they will be examined rather than dismissed. I therefore ask you to advise the Prime Minister without delay that this matter meets the threshold for formal investigation under the Code and that such an investigation should begin immediately. That is a perfectly reasonable request. Serious allegations have been raised, evidence has been presented, a formal complaint has been filed. The public deserves an investigation. The public deserves to know whether their Chancellor lied to them about the state of public finances in order to justify massive tax increases. That is not asking for special treatment. That is asking for basic accountability. However, Sir Laurie has now cleared Rachel Reeves of wrongdoing and has written to Farage that he will not be conducting a formal investigation. Not conducting. He is not even going to look into it. He has dismissed the complaint without investigation. He has decided, apparently without examining the evidence in any detail, that there is nothing to investigate, that Rachel Reeves did nothing wrong, that the British public should simply accept her version of events and move on. It comes a day after the Financial Conduct Authority also declined to open an investigation into Rachel Reeves, so both the ethics advisor and the financial regulator have decided not to investigate. Both have concluded, apparently without serious examination, that there is nothing to see here. That is not independent oversight. That is establishment protection. That is the system protecting its own. It is the second time Sir Laurie has cleared Rachel Reeves of wrongdoing following the row about her letting her South London home out without a licence. So he has now cleared her twice, once for illegally renting out property, once for potentially lying about public finances. At what point does this pattern become impossible to ignore? At what point does repeatedly clearing someone of wrongdoing start to look less like independent investigation and more like political protection? On Monday, Top Minister Darren Jones said, "The good news about the independent ethics advisor is that Keir Starmer made them independent. It is for Laurie Magnus to decide what he wants to do and how to respond to Nigel Farage's letter, and that is the right thing. Made them independent." That is the phrase that reveals everything. Starmer appointed Magnus. Magnus serves at Starmer's pleasure. Magnus knows that if he investigates too aggressively, if he holds ministers accountable too seriously, he could lose his position, so of course he is not going to conduct a serious investigation into Starmer's Chancellor. Of course he is going to dismiss complaints and clear her of wrongdoing, because that is how he keeps his job. Rachel Reeves has consistently denied the need for any investigation and refused to apologise if voters felt misled. Refused to apologise. Not even a conditional apology. Not even a, if anyone felt misled, I am sorry they feel that way. Just a flat refusal to apologise for anything. That is arrogance. That is contempt for the British public. That is a Chancellor who believes she can say whatever she wants, mislead whoever she wants, and face absolutely no consequences. The Chancellor was told on September 17th by the Office for Budget Responsibility that her so-called fiscal black hole was just £2.5 billion. 2.5 billion, not 16 billion, not the massive fiscal catastrophe she had been warning about for weeks. Just £2.5 billion, a manageable amount, an amount that could have been addressed through modest spending adjustments rather than £30 billion in tax increases. Opposition politicians have accused her of hiding this fact in order to hike taxes to fund more welfare spending, and they are absolutely correct. Reeves wanted to raise taxes, she wanted to increase welfare spending, she wanted to implement her ideological agenda, but she knew that the British public would not support massive tax increases without justification, so she created justification, she manufactured a fiscal crisis, she selectively presented information to make the situation look far worse than it actually was. And now she is being protected by the ethics advisor, by the Financial Conduct Authority, by the entire establishment apparatus that exists, supposedly to hold politicians accountable, but actually functions to protect them from consequences. The British public is being told that despite the evidence, despite the timeline, despite the obvious manipulation, Rachel Reeves did nothing wrong, that there is nothing to investigate, that everyone should simply move on and accept that the Chancellor can say whatever she wants without accountability. Massive boos are erupting across Britain as people realise what has just happened, as they realise that their Chancellor lied to them, that the evidence clearly shows she lied, and that the system supposedly designed to hold her accountable have simply decided not to bother investigating, as they realise that independence in government oversight is a complete fiction when the supposedly independent advisor is appointed by and serves at the pleasure of the very government he is meant to oversee. Rachel Reeves may not literally be crying over her lies, but she should be. She should be ashamed. She should be held accountable. She should face consequences for deliberately misleading the British public about the state of public finances in order to justify massive tax increases. But instead, she is being protected. She is being cleared. She is being allowed to continue as Chancellor as if nothing happened. That is the real scandal here. Not just that Reeves lied, but that the entire system has decided that holding her accountable is less important than protecting the government. That independence is less important than loyalty. That the British public's right to honest government is less important than the establishment's need to protect its own. Thanks so much for watching. See you in the next one.